All right, I want to give a shout out to horror movie review guy Pat. May you rest in peace. You were a beacon for me, man. You really got me into horror movies, and I can't believe it's been over 3 years that you have been gone. And he was the one to get me into horror as like a kid in middle school, but also he is the one who first got me aware of the movie Re-Animator because it was actually one of his favorite movies. Now, I was aware of this when I was like 12 or 13, and here I am at age 20 finally watching it for the first time. But going in, it's from the mid 80s. It's directed by Stuart Gordon. It's an H.P. Lovecraft story, and it's called The Re-Animator. So there are a few things that I could expect going into it. And also, I am aware that it's kind of not necessarily a horror comedy, but in that kind of vein. After watching it, I got to admit, it certainly was more than I expected. It kind of reminded me straight up the way it was acted, the way it was shot, some of the effects. It really reminded me a lot of Brain Dead, the zombie movie, which I watched actually about a year ago, which I actually really enjoyed. And I got to admit, I really enjoyed Reanimator as well. It's not necessarily a serious chiller. It's certainly a horror movie, but it's got a lot of comedy aspects, and it kind of reminds me a bit of like Frankenstein in a way, because you've got this character, Herbert West, I believe his name is, and he is kind of this mad scientist who is trying to reanimate things. He's doing extended research into what is it called, reanimacy or some shit, or I forget what the term is. I just have such a shit memory with things, but I literally just watched the movie. But he's been doing extensive research on bringing things back to life, whether it be animals and so on and so forth, and even tried in humans. And there's this great opening scene where it shows him in like Switzerland or whatever, reanimating this dude. And it's a crazy opening scene, and I'm not even gonna lie, it kind of was like, holy shit, okay, it's gonna be this kind of movie. Like within 5 minutes I was like, bro, this is giving me Brain Dead, Dead Alive vibes. And that movie was so much fun, and I was right, because this movie does give off those very fun, crazy splatterfest vibes. But anyway, Herbert West, yeah, he's a mad scientist. He's crazy. Not a mad scientist, but he's a guy where at first you're like, okay, he's really sussy. Is he a bad guy? He's murdering people technically, but at the same time, his intentions are good because he's trying to like bring things back to life and continue on, um, life for him and others, which is, I think at its core is probably a fundamental good thing. But he has a clash with one of his classmates, who he's going to med school with, that he ends up living with. And his girlfriend is the daughter of the dean, who hates Herbert West, who is skeptical of Herbert West because he is lulled into thinking that he is a worse guy than he actually is by, I believe it's the professor, who is very jealous of Herbert West's findings and wants to usurp him and basically take credit for all of the findings that Herbert West has made. And I got to admit, the two most unlikable characters in this movie both fucking die, which is cool. Our main character is actually not Herbert West. It's, I forget his name. I want to say his name is Dan. Um, he is the main character, essentially. But his girlfriend, she is hot, by the way. I just want to say that. I think she has got an amazing rack. And just in general, she was very attractive. And this movie, in very 80s fashion, had a shit ton of blood and guts and also quite a bit of nudity, which is whatever. She does, everybody has their own preference, but I would appreciate it if she shaved. But you know, it is what it is. I gotta be a misogynistic pig every once in a while. But no, her father is a piece of shit. And then her father's, I don't know what he is. Is he like a superintendent or something, or a dean? I'm not sure. I think his name is like Professor Hill. He's awful too, right? But yeah, there are a lot of different scenes. There's a lot of things going on in this movie where it's like I enjoyed it after the first viewing, but I feel like with repeated viewings, you'd even gain a greater appreciation for it because there's just it is it's about an hour and 25 minutes, but the thing I will admire about this movie is it is nonstop action. I mean, from the jump. I mean, that opening scene is craziness. Like, it's one of the craziest openings I've ever seen in any horror movie. And then, I mean, you know, you have, for me, I was always drawn to this Herbert West character because he's just so bizarre. He's so strange and he's so fascinating. He reminds me of like Victor Frankenstein or something. And you know, the scene where he reanimates Dan's cat, and then also, you know, just in general with the little green serum, how it's like super bright and like I don't know, man. Like, there's so many little quirks in this movie, and I mean, you know, it's certainly, when talking about it, it's very easy to ramble on because it's hard to focus on you know, so many different key cogs that are moving at the same time that are making this movie click and making it such an interesting watch, really. Because, you know, it's obviously a horror movie and that there is blood, guts, nudity. It's a pinnacle 80s style of horror, I think. I mean, it's not a slasher. It's not really a zombie. I guess it's kind of a zombie movie because the individuals or the creatures or whatever the fuck you want to call them that are resurrected by the serum resemble zombies. They don't eat flesh, but they're crazy because there's one like that looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger that just goes ape shit. But at the same time, it definitely has some like sci-fi elements with the, you know, reanimation and things like that, but also the comedy aspects. I mean, there's literally, for a good part of the movie, the dean, or whatever the fuck his name is, the guy who's trying to take Herbert West's credit, is literally walking around with no head because it's kind of interesting. It's not necessarily clear what the true antidote does, because at certain parts of the movie he'll give a little bit of a dose and it'll bring it won't bring a creature back to life. He'll put a little bit more and it'll bring it back to life, and it'll have like certain motor functions, but like there are varying levels to it, because the dose that, you know, Herbert West gives to the woman's daughter, Meg, I believe her name is, her father, sorry, Meg's father, he doesn't really retain any of like his mental capacity. He's like just a fucking brutal savage who's just crazy. But at the same time, when he injects Carl Hill, or whatever his name is, with the antidote, he is pretty much as sentient as ever, because I mean, he's able to go in and go back to the freaking morgue, reanimate all the other corpses, and like the ending is just fucking bananas. But there's definitely some comedy aspects to the movie, which once again, it really reminds me a lot of Brain Dead, which, you know, I certainly don't think is a movie for everybody, but it was one that I really enjoyed. And so, you know, when thinking about this movie, you kind of have to look at it in an entertainment sense, because I don't necessarily think it's one that's going to maybe scare a lot of people. And at the same time, it might not be one that everybody's going to take seriously, and might just be like, okay, this is just a stupid, goofy splatterfest. And they're not completely out of bounds there. And so, you know, obviously, if I were to give this thing a 5 out of 5, it would be nowhere near the 5 out of 5 like an Alien would get, you know? because they're two totally different movies. But nonetheless, I found the Re-Animator to be incredibly fascinating to watch. Certainly something I would watch again, and it was very enjoyable. I thought the acting was great. I thought the effects. I mean, it's Splatterfest, and the effects are fucking good. They are really good, especially with all the decapitations and just. I mean, that ending scene. There is just blood, guts, limbs, just everything getting ripped off. Honestly, the scene in the morgue kind of reminds me of the short from Creepshow with the crate. For some reason, I don't know. I just got those vibes. But yeah, no, I think I would recommend this to horror fans. I would say this is definitely a. I think it's like an 80s horror must see, personally. I really do. However, when it comes to like film fans, I'm kind of scared that they might be kind of turned off with how slapsticky at times it can be. I would recommend it to friends, and honestly, I would recommend it to casuals. It really depends, what your interests are and what you look for in horror movies. Because personally, I really enjoyed it, but I could understand why somebody else wouldn't. But yeah, I'm gonna go with. Ah, I'm gonna give it a 4. I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. I don't think I could quite give it anything more than that, just because I mean it is a little ridiculous at times. But honestly, there wasn't really any big issues that bothered me. But it's not perfect, and I mean it's a little goofy, and I really enjoyed it a lot. But I don't think I could imagine comparing it to something that I gave a higher score to, like Train to Busan or The Exorcist or The Alien, because I mean I don't really think it's quite in that class, but I don't know. I think it's a really enjoyable film. Yeah, we'll go we'll go 3.5. 3.5 out of 5. I think that's a good score. Definitely worth checking out, and something I'll probably revisit at some point.